Okay, welcome everybody. So this is the weekly live stream that we do every Wednesday here. We got Brian White, Futuraza. We got Nick Gibbs from Investing Against the Grain. Monday was looking pretty dire. We had the seventh worst day in Tesla stock history. Went down by 15%. We were all wondering what should Tesla do with the violence that was happening. Just tremendous amount of protests. Protests are fine, but it started to escalate into real serious things. I think there was one Tesla store that was shot up with, bullets. Something had to happen. Well, yesterday on Tuesday, we had two big announcements made, right? You had Elon Musk making the announcements, and we'll play that video where he said that he's pledging that Tesla will double production output for these vehicles in the United States over the next 2 years. And then President Trump said that he'd agree to label any kind of violence against Tesla stores as domestic terrorism. There's actually several other things that happened this weekend too that was pretty big news, but those were the two. So guys, are you happy with what you saw yesterday? Should there be more to be done? Today we saw the stock pop up again, so at least it seems to have stemmed the tide of it falling. What's your thoughts on that, Brian?
I'll start by saying that I've seen people say, well, based on its, it's not growing. So the PE, really, the stock should be worth 40. And if it drops to 40, that's what I'd pay. Yeah. The problem is if it dropped to 170, a lot of people would, anytime it drops, people will start buying it. So there are buyers at every price. The idea that it would go to 40 is pretty unfathomable to me. And the fundamentals support growth way beyond, valuation way beyond 40. I've been saying for weeks, we don't know where the floor is. Maybe we have found it. Maybe this is a dead cat bounce, but you need to look at the longer term execution. If the economy remains healthy, and maybe it will, then we're in good shape. If the economy heats up, we're in better shape. And if the economy suffers, then maybe the growth is a little bit delayed, but it doesn't mean it's going away, because everything that we see indicates that we are on the verge of a paradigm shift. And I know that's buzzwords that you hear in a business meeting, but I don't go to business meetings. I live in the real world.
This is the business.
And Cybercab is a paradigm shift. It will, when it arrives, not if, but when, it will get, it'll change everything. And money becomes a completely different question.
Thank you.
Not gonna lie, I kind of got completely thrown off on the prompt there, but I, for the most part, we're just talking about the stock. I agree with Brian on all the points he said.
What?
I think you and me never disagree on Tesla and the stock. That's not where we ever disagree. But no, the stock itself, who knows if this is the bottom or not. I definitely think things are oversold. I think everyone would say that. But this isn't a Tesla thing. If you look at Tesla, Palantir, Meta, AppLovin, NVIDIA, you name the company, everyone has seen a big sell-off, some more than the others. But the reason I name those specifically, because those have arguably had bigger sell-offs than what Tesla has. So while some of this may be at the same inconvenient time as all these protests and these idiots are doing violent things. And they are idiots. If you're doing violent things, you are not being constitutional or anything. You are a fool. Anyone who does violence or commits crime, end of story, you're a fool. But I think it's more so coincidence that this is all kind of happening at the same time. Because again, the market is selling off. It's the same time when all this tariff talks, negotiations, will they, won't they kind of things going on, and it's leading to uncertainty. And I think it's more of a perfect storm, and everybody likes to have a lightning rod to blame. And Elon's carried that torch for quite some time. So I think there's a good chance that this is just a complete overreaction market wide, not just Tesla, and that we will see a recovery around May by the latest.
I support everyone's right to protest. I think protest is
Agreed.
in our way of life. It's part of the American way. We have that constitutional freedom. Violence, we do not have a right to. Protection from violence, we have a right to. Don't do crime. I'm with Nick. Don't do crime.
So I think I like what Elon did yesterday, right? Making the announcement that they're going to double the U.S. production. That was important because there were a lot of people very concerned about Tesla's. They conveniently forget that there's this Model Y transition, and then so they're blaming reduction in sales. And did you not hear that you're a 50% cut? So everybody started getting very concerned about less sales. Nobody wants Teslas anymore. The brand has been damaged. For him to come out and say we're going to double the output, that sounded to me like a sort of a commitment to the future, but also just a confidence that Tesla will sell double the output in the United States. And let's just listen to what he actually said here.
Cars. I have an announcement to make that'd be helpful. I want to say, as a function of the great policies of President Trump and his administration, and as an act of faith in America, Tesla is going to double vehicle output in the United States within the next 2 years. Double.
Big deal. By the way, he makes one car. This one I don't understand. This one I don't want, but that's okay. Without a steering wheel, it comes out next year, right?
Yes.
Explain that, please.
Yes. Well, the Cybercab starts production in Texas next year, and it's self-driving. We have so much confidence in the self-driving nature of it that it will actually not have a steering wheel. It will not have pedals. It'll either self-drive or not drive at all, but it'll self-drive.
President Trump, and I'm going to pass on that particular.
Yeah, what do you guys think about this statement that he made? We're going to double this. He also then posted this in support of the policies of President Trump and to demonstrate our confidence in the future of the United States. Tesla commits to doubling vehicle production in the U.S. within 2 years. Is this enough to get everybody excited to expect that Tesla is going to increase sales? If they double it, right, Brian, you and I calculated it, the production output in the U.S. is about 1 million cars. So it sounds like they don't even need to necessarily build factories, but they sold 650,000 cars in the U.S. last year. So to double that, it's just another 650,000 cars in 2 years. Most of it could actually be Cybercabs, so they don't have to sell it necessarily. Is that enough, what he said?
To anyone watching the numbers as closely as we do, doubling in 2 years is not a challenge in terms of capacity. They would only need to add a few shifts to get capacity to that point. They wouldn't even need more. Yeah, no new construction would be required to reach those levels. And the Cybercab, upon completion, will ramp, I'm confident, very quickly. I don't know if it shows confidence in the economy or confidence in demand, but when it comes to Cybercab, the market doesn't have to demand it. They can keep a ton of them themselves. But if they want to sell outside, there are endless buyers who would buy them. People like me, for my small town, I would get a couple. If there's no services provided, I'd be the first guy in town to make them available. And somebody like Uber or Lyft, if they were allowed into that network, would come in and buy 10,000, 100, who knows, as many as works, because the value proposition is so insane. If level 5 is not achieved by 18 months from now, that 2 million becomes very difficult, realistically impossible. But Elon and Ashok appear entirely confident that is a delay of that magnitude is not likely.
What do you guys make of the? I feel like I'm so confused more than ever after watching Elon talk. But he had mentioned that production of the Cybercab starts in 2026, which is consistent with what we've heard on earnings calls. But the part that confuses me is we've heard a lot of Franz and others talk as if that starts in June
or before
Austin.
June.
Yeah.
Herbert and I talked about that on a show that'll be out, I think, tomorrow. But what my takeaway is, this isn't a big techie car event. This is just a press conference in front of a bunch of noisy, barking reporters. Let's keep it simple. Volume production next year. If they make a few hundred this year, that's enough to validate the network. If they get into start real serial production by the end of the year, that's close enough to next year. Better to underpromise and overdeliver, as Tesla, yes, really, sometimes does. It just doesn't make the same headlines as when they miss a date.
Yeah, I agree with that. I don't think that we're going to assume that he's now saying that production of Cybercaps won't happen until next year. Production of Cybercaps is happening now. It's already on its way. Like you said, we've heard both Lars and Franz mention that there's going to be Cybercabs. The question is how many, right? There's going to be 20 for sure. There's already 20 now. We drove it on October 10th. There's probably going to be 50 to 100, maybe, I doubt 1,000, but certainly by next year, that's going to start seeing thousands of them. I don't think that is in any way delayed. And in fact, if anything, him committing that in a couple of years we'll double it. So I was asking the question to Brian, if you release scale production of Cybercab next year, what number are you thinking? Are you thinking 100,000, 50,000, right? And so then in order to double 650 by 2 years, maybe you'll have 200,000 Cybercabs and the rest other cars? What's your guess?
Yeah, well, first of all, point of order, Herbert. We did not drive it. It drove people.
Did I say that?
You did.
What did I say?
You said we drove it last year, or
Oh,
yeah.
yeah. Gotcha.
Just one of those things. We'll all have to get used to saying those words.
Yes.
I think I was actually thinking through this, thinking, well, how many Teslas or how many Cybercaps do you need in a city? And I was thinking maybe 5,000 in a city. Like that seems maybe the right number. Maybe that's a little overkill. I imagine you would want probably a little overkill. You would probably want a little more saturation than not, would be my guess. But so if you assume 5,000, okay. And then I started thinking like, okay, well, what cities, you got 5,000 in Austin, you could do 5,000 in Houston and Dallas and, maybe LA, San Fran, San Diego, you go on and on. So, when you start thinking about the numbers, like, okay, well, that could, easily be 200 to 300. I could see Tesla maintaining 200 to 300 Cybercabs for their own self before they even start selling them. And I kind of think that's also what they would do, is that the first, I don't know, few 100,000, I don't know. You guys help me think through this, but I would think that they would want to keep them so that they could learn issues with them, quickly iterate. Then again, couldn't they do that if they sold them? I don't know. There's a lot to it.
So here's my thought on that is there may be times when they want to restrict how many are in operation in total. Maybe we're trying out a new feature. Maybe we only want 500 on the road at any given time, even though we've got 5,000 or 10,000 out there. If it's not in their network, they can't tell people to stop using it. But if it's in their network, they have more control. So during the testing phase, I can see them wanting to keep 100% of them for themselves, even for as long as they can, really, because, and then if there is a critical issue, there's no recall to deal with. You just swap them out. It's your car. Just don't even think twice. And I think that once you bring in a consumer, a customer, whether it's a fleet manager or an individual, then you've got a whole bunch of different other things. And the nice thing about big fleets over individuals is that you have one point of contact instead of 500 points of contact. And the best thing about keeping them in-house is you have no point of contact. It's all done by you. So I think you're dead on just everything you just said.
Yeah,
Okay,
I
yes,
suspect,
But don't let it go to your head.
I suspect that Tesla's going to keep every single Cybercab that they make for a very long time, certainly for the next 2 years, right? So if you think about it, they're going to let our cars into the network second half of next year. Why would they sell you a Cybercab, but that in early? That's not going to happen for at least a couple of years until after they let us in there. And then I want to play this video. Brian and I did a video I'm going to publish on my channel where you have Ron Barron. Ron Barron is a multi-billionaire invested in Tesla. Listen to what he says, because what he says here is sounding like that he's saying that, this guy said, did Ron Barron just spill the beans? Because Ron said Tesla will keep the cars. It's not exactly what he said, but let's listen to it. And each car will generate so much money. It's 15 to 20 times the profit if you just sell a car. today. So why would you sell? And how much profit would you get if you sold a Cybercab, by the way? Because it costs you so much less money. So let me play that video and listen carefully to what Ron Barron says.
Let me just ask.
But anyway,
you.
the fundamentals are changing. Instead of making $5,000 or $6,000 or $7,000 a car, you're going to robo cars, and every time they have 1 million cars that they make, that they keep, that are $30,000 a piece that last 1 million miles, those cars are going to generate 50,000 revenue miles a year. So before the model was they're making $7,000 in profit a car, $6,000 in profit a car, 1,000,008 cars. Now all of a sudden you're keeping the cars and making them robo-taxis. What that means is that if you do 50,000 miles a year for a car, those cars will generate 50,000 revenue miles, will generate $30,000 or $40,000 or $50,000 in profit per year, per car. So every time you have 1 million cars, you're adding $30 or $40 or $50 billion to $30 or $40 or $50 billion to profit.
Okay, what do you guys think of what you just heard there? He said a few times.
Yeah, I was going to say, just to wrap up what you said before on the volumes, I do think that the rest of the volume would be supplemented by this new vehicle that we have yet to see. As far as what Ron was saying, the more you, I mean, I don't think that you want Tesla necessarily to keep every Cybercab that they make. But to your point, Herbert, for the first year or two, it actually makes a lot of sense, because then you kind of shift the paradigm away from, yeah, maybe it costs, 25 to 30K for the vehicle itself to make, or maybe less than that. But I don't think that means you would sell it for that, because you would sell it for what it could do, right? Like what it could produce. Like it'd be kind of crazy for me to sell you something where I make like maybe a 30% margin on it, but then you get to go take it and you can make 80% margins on it. Like that doesn't feel right. So I would imagine a Cybercab specifically would cost a lot more. And by them holding it for 2 years, it allows them to essentially show that it's worth a lot more. I don't know. There's something there that just seems off to me to think, oh, we'll just buy it.
I'm going to agree with Nick. I don't think the $25,000 price point is something that is possible, but I don't see any reason they should sell it for $25,000. I did ask the engineers at 25 grand or whatever the price is, does that include the FSD, or is that a subscription or a purchase on top? And they paused and said, I don't understand how it could not include it since there's no wheel. I said, well, yeah, but there's a lot of times industrial hardware that you purchase has software that is required. I know there are charging stations where the software is, you get free updates for 10 years, but after 10 years, we charge you an annual fee to operate this hardware that you own that is worthless without the software. And it's like, that's frustrating, but it is a thing that businesses do. I think even if the cost to build it is 20 grand, I don't understand why you'd sell it for less than 50.
Yeah. Okay. Back to my original question though, right? We saw tremendous pressure on the Tesla stock. He comes out and says, we're going to double production, US production. Is that enough to change the narrative of Tesla being back to a growth company, being back to, selling cars at, higher car? And we all know here who's watching the show, we know that the reason why the volume of sales has gone down or will go down is because they made the transition to Model Y. It's not because people aren't wanting to buy Teslas right now. Certainly there might be a hit in Europe. Sure. We don't know the amount. Certainly there might be a hit here in the US maybe, but it's not showing up in China. And at the end of the day, they might actually still grow. So now you change that narrative by making that announcement. Is that enough? Do you think that that's, investors are comfortable again because he's really put a quell to this?
Let me ask you a question, Herbert, or Brian too. How many Cybercabs do you think they'll make over the next 2 years?
Yeah, that's the question I was asking, right?
No, I'm going somewhere with this.
So
Okay.
I'll give you a straight answer. From the time they enter production, I think they'll make 100,000 in the first 12 months, not the run rate, but the total. 100
Okay.
grand, 12 months.
I think it's going to be at the minimum 100,000. And I know we were very optimistic about Cybertruck, and we all thought it was going to be around 70,000. It turned out to be around 50,000. I think the Cybercab is a lot easier to make, so 100,000 would be minimum, if not more, because it's a Cybercab. So once they get going, like Brian is saying, in the second half of the year, I think they can make more than 100,000. That's the minimum.
And then how many consumer vehicles do you think, or how many people do you think will actually put their vehicles into the Tesla fleet?
I have no idea.
That's the
I have
second
no
half of
idea.
next year.
10%, 15%
We
of
know
people?
that 2.5 million cars in the US have FSD in it, and another 2.5 in China. So assuming just the US, 2.5 million, I'd say 30% would put it in, if not 50%. But, you know, I mean, I'm just trying to be conservative.
Okay. Are you aligned with that? No.
No, I'm thinking more like 10%.
Okay. So let's just say that means
That's money, Brian.
250. Let's just say
You're making money.
250,000. So 250,000 plus your 100,000 you think on that first year. So that's 350,000 vehicles that might be. Okay. So let me zoom back out. So he said that we'll double US production, right? The sandbagging in that number to me is that now we've just talked about 300, call it 400,000 vehicles in that range that could be part of the FSD network, which that 3 to 400,000 is really, you have to multiply that by 5x to equate to the same amount of profits that you would get from selling a vehicle, potentially. Maybe just 3x or 4x or whatever, choose your number, right? But so that's the real measure. Who cares about how many vehicles you sell? The question is, how much profit can I get on a per vehicle basis? And so that's the thing. So what's the equivalency of that? Is that equivalency not just a doubling, but is that a 5, 6, 7x?
Did you just freeze?
Equivalency to vehicles that I froze?
Brian?
I
I'm
see
here.
both of you. I'm good. I see
That
Brian.
leaves you
Brian,
both?
I guess Herbert lost us, but
you're
we are
back?
still here.
you're here.
We haven't gone anywhere.
You left us.
Oh, okay. On my
My
side, I
numbers
was the
got
only one
so
talking.
high that we
On my
lost.
side, I was the only one talking. The two of you were frozen. This is really weird. Okay, sorry.
Anyways, hopefully you kind of got my
Yeah,
rough
I got
ballpark math
fine.
there, that it doesn't
Yeah.
matter how many vehicles they produce. What matters is one vehicle that is in the robotaxi network. What are the profits that produces? How many of those vehicles are there? Which
Yeah.
could be more like a 5x, not a doubling of vehicles.
So I've got we have a killer video that's going to come out on Saturday by Cern Basher. We're going to record it on Friday. And what I had asked him to do was exactly that, which is, okay, everybody there's a lot of investors in Tesla who really just want to know, when is the earnings going to start going up? And because just like when you look at what happened to NVIDIA, it was the earnings that they just shocked the world with, this earnings in this quarter. Then the next quarter, they just beat the earnings, and then they kept beating the earnings. And then when people start realizing, oh my God, there's a whole new paradigm here, AI chips is a big deal, then the stock went skyrocketing. When does that happen for Tesla? And so don't just show me what's going to happen per year. Show me by month and by quarter what the actual earnings will be. And Cern told me that this video coming out on Saturday is going to be the biggest. He's done so much work, and he is going to shock everybody when the earnings come out. Exactly what you just said, Nick. When you start calculating these things on a month-to-month basis, it's going to come way sooner than we realize when you'll actually see it show up in the books.
Cool.
But I like where you're going, Nick. I mean, I think we saw James Dama once say that in Chicago, you only need 10,000 ride-hailing cars to service that city. Is that the right number? Didn't he even say 10,000?
I haven't seen any specific numbers. I know Nick said 5,000 per city, and I know some cities that's definitely not enough, and some cities that's too much. But as an average, I like that number. You can look at a service like Uber that has 1 million drivers or something, but those aren't full time, and they certainly aren't 24-hour a day. A lot of those are just people who pop in for a few hours a few times a week or month. In terms of just getting raw averages, it's fine. Of course, after the big game ends or the big parade, whatever it is, some big event, you'll need all of them at once. And that could draw from other areas in the surrounding, markets to fill that need. The problem with any of the numbers that we run, with CERN's numbers, with my numbers, with any of them, is that as soon as you start looking at it, the numbers get real crazy real quick. I know on our show you brought up Jordan Giesege's tweet that said for every million Cybercabs deployed that Tesla would own themselves, it would be something like $1 trillion to the market cap, or 30 trillion. I don't remember, but the numbers get insane almost instantly because
$1 trillion.
Yeah, because of how big it is. And it's just a money printer.
When do you get to 1 million Cybercaps? I mean,
A matter of years. And I don't mean very many. If it works, it works. And there's no reason to slow down if it works once you've got it dialed in. And then it just keeps getting, the production keeps getting better and the cost to build them keeps going lower. And if you're building 1 million, 2 million a year
Brian,
worldwide, the cost goes down.
How many Cybercaps can you make in equivalent to a Model Y or Model 3?
I would be surprised if you can't make twice as many. In terms of sheer, the battery is half the size. There's going to be about half the motors because there's no 2 or 3 motor models. It's only got 3 pieces of glass. It's a very simple vehicle to build. And the unbox method, we don't have an actual figure on how much more productive it is, but it doesn't matter because it's so much shorter line that even if it's only as efficient as the Model 3 and Y lines, they would just put in 6 lines because it's so small they could do that. So, yeah. And of course, no or virtually no paint shop. It's just got everything going for it in terms of cost reduction. And I've had some lengthy conversations with engineers who don't want to go on the record talking about how they still have tremendous confidence in Waymo's approach. And I say they can't, because even if Waymo were to hit the most optimistic targets, they're still paying double for their man mover and probably double for the juice to keep it on the road. It doesn't make sense. It's going to be at a substantial disadvantage unless somebody else follows directly in the footsteps. Yeah.
So is the rate limiting step going to be regulation then? So like if you're saying 5 to 10,000 per city, how many, pretty soon, once you make 200,000 Cybercabs, then you add the other own robotaxis next year, you're going to have 400,000. How many cities would you need by the end of next year to approve this?
I mean, I don't see a limiting factor at all when it comes to that. I mean,
Really?
there are so many. I mean, how many cities are there in the United States?
Just start with the Texas, Arizona, Florida, and California. How many markets could you fill while the other states are watching on saying, yeah, it really does work. How do we stop them? You can't stop them at that point. I agree with Nick. I don't know what the limiting factor would be other than Jordan Giesecke.
It says there's 20,000 incorporated cities, towns, and villages. Population's over 100,000. There's 351. That is over 100,000.
So Texas has. Oh, can you hear me? Sorry.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah. Okay. So Grok says Texas has 971 cities. Arizona has 91 cities. Florida has 282 cities. California has 482 cities. So you're gonna be busy for a while.
Yes, but the definition of city is pretty loose. The trick is, one thing that's nice is you've got a little town like Cooley City, Washington, which is usually a city of 500 people, but once a year on Memorial Day weekend, it is the last stand rodeo. And now all of a sudden you've got a bunch of people swarming the town and drinking. it would be easy for a centralized company like Tesla to say, yeah, let's just move all the taxis into the cities where the rodeo travels through so there's enough coverage. Because right now, there is no ride sharing in a lot of those small towns, and there certainly isn't a taxi service. So what do? Bum a ride or drive drunk or not drive at all? The options aren't great in any of those cases, I imagine, but it opens up not just we're not looking at just replacing existing rideshare and taxis, but opening up new opportunities that currently don't exist because it's cost prohibitive. And yeah, I just don't know what the rate limiter will be.
I just asked Grok about Uber, and it says here that for the entire United States, 375 to 600,000 nationwide is how many active cars that you need. So call it 500,000 cars is what you need. You need about 200,000 cars in California, 100,000 in Texas, 70, 90,000 drivers in New York, like that. So
but that's not the best. That's apples and oranges. That's what I would say.
Mm-hmm.
I agree with
because
that.
Because a Cybercab can drive 24 hours a day instead of a...
No, it has nothing to do with that. It's because that includes you having to pay a human. The second you take a human out of it, or the second you start dropping the price, demand goes up. So as demand goes up, you need to add more vehicles. So that's...
But it's just a good way to think about it, right? So 500,000 active cars can serve the U.S. if you're just competing against a ride-hail exam. Yeah.
Even now, I would say it's still, even then, would probably be closer to like 750,000, because you know how often I have to sit there and wait for an Uber or a Lyft, or I'm going between both apps and like, what's going to pick me up? Especially like...
my point is not a lot. 500,000 cars, Tesla can do that in a couple of years, right? And if you add our cars into it as well, it'll be done in a couple of years.
Yeah, I don't know. That's if things stay stagnant, if there's no more growth, right? There's more and more people using ride hailing. I mean, everything. Here's the real question: how many vehicles are bought per year? That's the real question.
Well,
and then maybe you take...
Tesla sold 650,000 cars in the U.S. last year.
I'm saying in general, in the United States, how many vehicles are sold per year?
Mm-hmm.
That's the metric. And I would take maybe say 10% off of that, because there's like, a lot of utility vehicles and stuff that, you're not going to use for everyday driving. But in general, the way to me, it seems just really obvious that there's going to get to a point where a Cybercab ride will become so cost effective that it's just stupid to own a vehicle. Why would you pay for insurance, maintenance, like and I don't think it's really that. I don't even think it has to be equivalent to owning a vehicle. At $1 a mile period, why would you ever own a vehicle? The risk reward's not even there just for having to get a new tire. Like, it's just not there.
Right. If you look at your monthly payment on your car and your insurance and your fuel and your maintenance and your repairs, at $1 a mile, owning a car becomes kind of difficult unless you only buy used cars. But this means used cars might be getting more expensive as less people buy new cars in the first place, because every used car starts its life as a new car. If someone else doesn't take that depreciation hit, you're going to struggle. And we saw that during the lockdown when new cars weren't being made. The cost of used cars went up ridiculously. At one point, my minivan I'd bought 3 years earlier was worth more than I paid for it on trade-in. Forget, private party, just the trade-in value was that high. And that could happen, that if new cars stop being manufactured, used cars will get more expensive. If every car is a robo-taxi in the future, whether it's from Tesla or someone else, used prices could get up, could be inverted from where they are now.
Okay, so that's the first announcement, right? Elon saying that he's going to double U.S. production. The other announcement that he made was, or that Trump made, that they will label violence against Tesla dealers as domestic terrorism. Do you think that this is going to stop? Is it going to increase?
Short term, it won't until the first person gets arrested and charged. I don't think it'll necessarily change anything. But here's the beauty: is you've just by making it a federal crime, you've expanded the investigative power, the investigative reach. Unfortunately, the FBI has been seeing massive layoffs because of efficiency, but that doesn't always help get investigations done. But this, people throw around words like domestic terrorism to describe all manner of things that they don't like. But if it is politically motivated violence, that's the definition. And the only way you can say it's not is if you're going to say that property isn't people. And that if you look up the definition of violence, in many cases, it is against property damage can count as violence. It is destructive. And when you get into something like arson has the potential for human harm. So that is still, if you throw a Molotov cocktail into into an area where people aren't, that still looks an awful lot like an act of terrorism. It really fits the description. So I think that the definition may be accurate, and the headline that you showed specified violence against the dealerships. If you're firing a gun into a Tesla showroom, which they did in Tigard, Oregon, I think it was Tigard or Beaverton maybe, there is no way to not call that violence. And I think if what you're trying to do is affect political change, you've checked all the boxes and shut them down.
Just real quick to wrap up the last discussion, I looked it up. So in 2023, there are 15.5 million normal passenger vehicles sold. So that's how many, I would say, Herbert. Like, I don't think there's going to be any foreseeable saturation.
You're talking, future. You can keep making as many robo-taxis as you can. They'll be unlimited for a period of time. Yeah.
Yeah. So imagine if like Tesla has 1/3 of all the vehicles for autonomy and other companies do their own thing. This is just insane. And that's just the United States. As far as I think it's look, this isn't just a Tesla thing. In general, I think that you should be able to throw the entire book at anybody who does any kind of violence like this to any company, whether it's a U.S. company or international company that's doing business in the United States, because this is just bad across the board. It's bad. One, we don't want that for our own companies, right? Like, we should be proud of our companies, no matter what they are. We should be proud of them. They're American companies. We should be proud of those. But even for other companies, foreign companies, if we want them to come and build here and create jobs here, it's insane. Why would they do it? Like, in case that they're on the wrong side of something, like this is wild. And the truth is, these political opinions that lead someone to going and listen, if someone's going to be violent like this over something like this, where else are they violent? In their homes, with their loved one? Like, there's something that's unstable with these people if you're willing to go to that lengths. And I just think we need to take it more seriously. Maybe it's a mental health issue. Maybe it's, I don't know what it is. I'm not going to pretend like I do, but to get that upset is insane to me. It just doesn't make sense. Listen, there's people who work at these companies in Seattle. I guarantee most people who are in Seattle politically are not for Trump. But you're sitting there and a place gets shot up, whatever. It's like, this is insane. These are people who work for a company and they're just trying to put food on the table, live their lives, get home back to their families. Like, it's just wild to me. Like, it's not cool. There's no company out there that's red or blue or libertarian or whatever. Like, these companies are a mesh of all of us. So to target the companies is, I don't know, it's shallow to me. And once you get to, and that's just for protesting, I feel like it's shallow, but you can protest. That's your constitutional right. And whether I agree with you or not, I would defend you on doing that, because you should be able to do that. With regards to the violence, no, just period, none. That's not allowed. Everybody in this country should be allowed to go home to their families. End of story.
Agree on all points. I would say that there was the stickers we saw in the Northwest group on X where someone was slapping them on cars and it said, "You should sell your car." And my response to that was, "Why? So you can go harass whoever bought it next week?" Because you don't know this person's situation. Maybe they got the car for free from someone who was so fed up that they're never going to do business with this guy again. But you know what? I know someone who doesn't have a car at all. I'm going to just give it to him. And this jerkwad is out there slapping stickers on it. You don't get to just, it's like shooting into the air. You don't know where that bullet's coming down. Don't do that either. I'm going to go out on a limb. I'm going to take a bold stance here, guys. Don't shoot into the air.
No, this is happening, right? There's a lot of hate to Elon and to Tesla. They're trying to take down Elon. Now, for a Tesla investor, I'm hearing from other investors that are going, okay, sales are going down. Well, we're saying, no, it's not because it's Model Y. But I'm going to see the Q1 sales are going to go down. Then I'm worried about sales in the future because I'm seeing a lot of hate for Tesla. And I can see a lot of people do not want to be seen in a Cybertruck. There are going to be reduction in sales for that. I'm concerned about that. And so the brand damage is they're carrying it forward to future. Do you guys think that this move, it's not, I think these are two very important moves that happened yesterday, but they're not enough. There should be more to be done still to change that perception and the impressions of people. Or do you think that they're enough?
So on the sales being down because of Elon, my answer isn't no, it isn't. My answer is too soon to say. The data for Q1 will not show that. We won't be able to see from the data because with all the factories retooling, there's so much noise already built into the signal that it's going to be hard to see clearly. I think Q2 and 3 won't necessarily give us a clear picture either because Model Y demand for the refresh is going to be abnormally high. If we're into Q3, if everything is fully ramped and it's down, then we'll have some better data. So I don't know that. Yeah, I've seen people leaving comments on videos saying, well, it's over. Sales are down 90%. What are you talking about? That's definitely not a thing. Be honest. If you're going to be cynical, at least try and stay somewhere close to the edge of sanity on it. I don't see anything in the last couple days that I think is necessarily going to move the needle. Model Y is the best seller. You can't sell it if it's not available. It's only now becoming available again. The announcement could move a bunch of S and X and maybe Cybertruck. Those are available, but threes, I mean, I guess you could, but Model Y is the best seller. And if you place an order today, you're not going to take delivery for a while. So I don't know how much that's going to move the needle. Nick?
Yeah, I'm in alignment with you, Brian. Look, anyone who's talking about Tesla sales are down, those are people who have an agenda. It's just unequivocally untrue. We saw the same kind of rhetoric last year during the Model 3. I don't even know why they keep doing this. I don't know if people actually even listen to this anymore. It's been debunked for so long. It's like talking about a Tesla recall, and it's like, what are you talking about? They sent the over air update and they updated the icon. Like, this is stupid. Like, what are we talking about here? Remember that? That was insane. So I think it's more so along those lines. As far as the brand damage and all that, honestly, Herbert, I know I heard you last night talking about like your wife's perception and all this and what you're seeing. I think it's a very small few people who are willing to be that vocal about these things. I think most people, I think the vast majority of people don't want to be vocal about their political stances, and they kind of keep things to themselves. I don't think they're out there, putting that type of hate out there or vitriol. Like, you gotta be a special type of person to really want to go up and like flick someone off or driving a Cybertruck or whatever. It's like most people aren't that outgoing, I don't think. But even then, I think anyone who actually owns a Tesla, I would imagine a lot of these people don't own a Tesla. Sure, there's going to be, I think, a handful of people that want to get rid of their Tesla or whatever because they're so politically ideological. These are the same people that will say that they're going to move to Canada every single time a Republican gets in office. It's like, okay, let's just move on from this. Like, no one wants to leave the United States, no matter what. It's a great country. That's why we were able to have 8 years of Obama into Trump to Biden. Like, this is the beauty of this country. We have levity. You don't see that in a lot of other places. But the way I see it, anyone who actually owns a Tesla, even if you don't like Elon, you don't like where he's gone with politics and all this, if you own a Tesla and you're going to think about selling it, you're literally probably going to either one, immediately regret it when you realize, crap, I can't just plug it in my garage. Or maybe you get an EV and then you realize, crap, I can't take a road trip with this because where am I going to charge? It's going to be a horrible experience. Or you're going to be in traffic and you're going to be like, crap, I got to drive. This is annoying. You're going to regret it pretty instantly. Or you're going to be someone who's like, oh my God, Elon's annoying me. I hate the crap he's doing. I wish he would just shut the hell up. I don't want to be a target for any of this stuff. But you know what? I'm not giving up my Tesla. He may be loony, but that crazy loony guy sure knows how to make great products. And it just is what it is. I'm not going to get rid of my Starlink because guess what? Next time we have a hurricane or a whatever, I want to be able to be connected to the world. So like, yeah, he can have crazy thoughts. He's always had crazy thoughts. Honestly, if it wasn't for his craziness, I probably wouldn't have the things I have related to him. So, hey, you can't win them all. We can't be in alignment on all of them. And then the beauty is he's doing what I honestly thought was going to be impossible. He's getting the more conservative people to all of a sudden start wanting Teslas. It's like the greatest game of chess you've ever seen, where you start off with the green energy environmentalist people, Democratic Party, then you get them hooked on to such an amazing vehicle with great interface and FSD and ease of charging. So they're not going anywhere. And now you get, I'm not saying this is a game, but now you get all these conservatives to be like, oh,
not the game.
You know what, we're
That
just at
was
least going
not
to go
his game.
test drive one.
So I haven't seen the conservative buyers show up in the data yet. I've seen anecdotes, but I've seen anecdotes of liberals selling their cars and switching out. I'm done with the brand. Because of the age of my channel, I'm more likely to see people who've been Tesla owners for a long time. My anecdotes are not representative, and I know that there's selection bias in that. What I do know is when I drove the Cybertruck for the overnight test drive here in my small town, an hour from Portland, 2.5, 3 hours from Seattle, I did get a lot of hate. I got middle finger salutes, and I got a woman yelling boo. And as I've said before, I'm not scared. I'm pretty sure she's not a real ghost. But in the Model Y, you don't get the hate. There's too many of them on the road. I've never encountered hate for driving a Model Y. It doesn't register. There's just too many of them. What you said about switching brands, if I let's say I was upset, what would I buy? Because I need, there's two things that I expect a car to have that is not quite ubiquitous yet. One is I need the autonomy. It is so good. It makes my life so much better. And the other guys have some, Blue Cruise will do some of it for you pretty well on the highway. But they're very limited systems. And the other is the charging experience. There was an account I read on Reddit the other day of someone who rented a Tesla from Hertz, got to the airport, and they said, oh, we're all out of Teslas. Here's a Polestar. And it's like, where do I go to charge this? How do I deal with this? And so he went to a Tesla supercharger, and it didn't work. That location, not all locations are set up to charge all vehicles. So, and how do you know which one? Is it intuitive? Is there anything? So I would not want to road trip unless I had full access to the supercharger network. If you have a Tesla, you can still go to Electrify America in a pinch if you need to. You've got an adapter that will allow you to charge CCS, but the inverse is not always true. Not all cars can charge at a supercharger. So it is, in my estimation, on some of the key metrics that are most important to me, an irreplaceably good vehicle. And in terms of the downside of the hate, I probably wouldn't want to buy a Cybertruck right now, but I'm not a Cybertruck buyer anyway. So doesn't really affect me. And I would absolutely buy another Model Y.
Yeah. The other big news that happened just this weekend was official delivery of Model Y in Texas and Berlin. Now they're selling it and delivering it every place now. So this downturn in Tesla, the transition to the new Model Y, it's still happening, and there's still going to be a catch-up mode. I'm not saying it's done, but we're probably at the turnaround now. In the next month or two, things should be, back to full-scale production Model Y. Is that your estimate, Brian?
Yes, I think, it's impossible to know how quick it's getting up and running, but the motivation is certainly there. I was expecting it to already be a bit, to have ramped a bit quicker than it has. But yeah, it's by end of quarter, I would expect us to be at 75-80% of full run capacity on Model Ys in all factories. In Shanghai, I think they'll be closer to 100.
Are you both still thinking for the end of the year, 2025, are we going to be below last year? Are we going to be about the same? Or are we going to be, 30% growth like Elon had actually forecasted?
As of right now, under. Because as of right now, we haven't seen the new, more affordable vehicles, and we don't know if any, let alone many Cybercabs will be deployed. That more affordable vehicle is pivotal. So once we see that, we'll understand. We don't even know we don't know the actual price. We don't know the spec. We don't know anything. So I'll wait to see that and revise my numbers again. But if that vehicle is not released, my numbers are showing a downturn for this year.
I'll stick with what Elon says.
Ooh. Mm-hmm.
Well, he says a lot of things.
Well, I mean,
And as
that's
my
what he
friend
did
Brian
say
says,
during the.
he's also
He said
right
it
a lot
during
of
the
times.
earnings, though. That's a little different. That's a true official earnings, guidance.
A realistic projection based on the best information available. Yeah, he knows things that we don't. He knows what the vehicle is, when it will be out, what it will cost, and that if I knew those things, I imagine I would have the confidence to say what he's saying as well.
There's also, it's not even just about how many vehicles they make, what they can produce, the new models. Not even just that. If the White House is able to pull off what they're doing, and if it leads to rates dropping and kind of forces the Fed's hand to drop rates, that alone could make it more cost effective to buy vehicles, and that could spur more demand. So there's all kinds of things that could happen.
Yeah.
And if it goes
Mm-hmm.
the other direction, what
Right.
happens then?
Yep.
I think the vehicle deliveries will probably still be more or less the same. There won't be a
It'll be
big
the same
boost,
because
but there'll be
Tesla
more
will just do
discounting.
incentives. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it'll just be more discounting.
So when this show
It won't go
ends,
the other way. It won't go the other way.
well, it depends. It depends on the extent of the chaos. When
No,
this show,
period, it won't. Rates will come down.
yes, but there's other headwinds that could be faced. He's trying to tackle a lot of issues. When this show ends in a matter of minutes, I will be on my channel with a after show where we address some of the comments. I do want to thank Nick and Herbert for having me and joining me and all that. And enjoy the remainder of the conversation. However long this runs, I will be listening in, so you don't need to jump over at the top of the hour. If it goes over, I wait and listen along with all y'all. And thanks, Nick, for hanging out, and Herbert.
Thank you so
Cheers.
much, Brian. So the other big giant news that I think I don't know. Do you think that it's being ignored by the investor community is the China FSD? It's been out there for a couple of weeks now, and I've been taking these videos that they've been sharing. It's gone viral in China and translating it so that we can all understand what they're saying. But by far, like these testers, Tesla owners who have FSD have been testing it. And it looks like right now it's only the hardware 4 cars, but there's now code that's showing that the map's going to be updated for the hardware 3 cars. That's going to come soon. But these videos are just amazing. They're blowing away people. They're realizing it can be done anywhere, not just in the grid cities. They can be done. They're comparing it against Huawei, against Baidu, against Xiaomi, and they're showing them how much better Tesla is in many different ways. It certainly is making mistakes when it's not choosing the bus lane. certain, going down certain streets that it's not supposed to go down. And so there's issues with the, mapping and with just the understanding of how the Chinese system works. But overall, people are very excited. So just that alone, FSD, being known that's out there, that's going to boost sales. It is a demand driver. Just FSD. So don't, let's not talk about robotaxi here. Just FSD alone. And we are at version 13. And by the end of this month, by the way, a couple of weeks from now, when I ask people when did they expect the next version of FSD to be dropped, they're still expecting it to be this month. And that's going to be, right, the recognition of emergency vehicle sirens, the ability to choose what happens at the end of a drive, right? Do I park it? Do I find parking? Do I park it at a very specific location? And it's supposed to be the 3 times context window, so it should make it even more smoother and more effective. So that's coming soon. We'll see what happens. But any thoughts on that? Because I think that's the real story, isn't it? Like, we need to be talking more about the FSD experience in China.
Yeah, maybe I see it a little differently than you do when it comes to the Chinese market.
Mm.
Probably I'm gonna split hairs here, so bear with me. But the issues that it's experiencing in China, I do not consider those issues. To me, I'm very relieved seeing how it's
Yeah.
handling China. Um, an issue to me with FSD would be it's doing an error when driving. So like a bus lane, I don't consider that an error. That's more so like I would make that same mistake if I was driving China for the
Mhm.
first time. Right.
Mhm.
So like something that if you drop me in a new place, an error I would make, I don't consider that an error in my ability to drive. That's just, oh, I didn't realize I can't, like, whoops, it's an accident.
Mhm.
Um, so I see that as like not an issue. If I started seeing like, oh, it can't, or it's making a mistake in this crazy roundabout that only China has, that would cause me, consternation. But that's not the case. The functions of driving, it seems to be doing it perfectly. Um,
Perfectly. Yeah.
so little nuances on rules, stuff like that, I can live with that all day. Are you kidding me?
Mhm.
That to me is easy. That's easy. So that's what that gets me really excited. It'll be interesting to see if they end up rolling out a subscription to see
Right.
how much they can recognize in this coming up earnings. And this is where things become very different because let's say there's what 2 million vehicles or 2 million Teslas in China. Yeah, help me out with these numbers, Herbert. How many Teslas are there in China?
Well, there's 2.5 million Teslas that are FSD capable in China that just got turned on.
Okay. So just imagine that. Imagine if well, that's 2 point. Okay, but only hardware 4 right now is being given out, right? So that's not 2
True.
point. So
That's not all 2.5 yet. Yeah.
let's
Correct.
say that's just 500,000. Let's say it's 500,000,
Yep.
and FSD cost what 7-8 grand to buy it, and there's no subscription yet there. So would that be the equivalent of another 500,000 vehicles sold?
Huge. Right. As
Like,
soon as they, yep.
yeah, so that's what I'm saying. So when it comes to it doesn't
Yes.
matter how many vehicles are sold anymore. What matters at this point is how many in China will adopt FSD? How many more people in the United States will adopt FSD? What will this new vehicle do for deliveries?
Yeah.
And then add in FSD. If the Cybercab starts to come out, all of a sudden we can get to end of the year, and even if we barely have growth in delivery numbers, it might look like we doubled the amount of vehicles just because of FSD. It's possible. I'm not saying it's going
Yeah.
to, but it's
Yeah.
possible. So it's it just becomes more so. Do you care more about how many vehicles get delivered, or do you care about FSD subscriptions and margins on that? And to me, we are in this what didn't they call it? We're between these two phases or
Mhm.
waves of growth.
Waves. Mhm.
We're starting to see us officially close out of one wave and get into the other one. And I think that starts with seeing a lot of these numbers come through for FSD in China, to see Cybercab, the new vehicles. Like, we're starting to see that ramp up. So I think, look, Elon's the luckiest guy that I think I've ever seen in my life. just enough to do one more rocket to save us from bankruptcy, just enough to, get the Model 3 line going.
Mm.
Oh my God, we just happened to stumble upon the answer to FSD. Oh, we just got lucky on installing cameras and all this on all these vehicles. Like, the guy gets really lucky a lot. And so, his timing of all this, you know, he's just really lucky. Just keeps getting lucky over and over. So I think his whole analogy of these two growth waves is going to be pretty spot on, and I think we're starting to see it now. And again, I think come May, if you just look at the stock, come May, I would be shocked if we're not pushing towards, the 300s, high 300s again, because by May, we'll have passed April 2nd, which is the reciprocal tariffs. We'll have gotten past all the Canada, Mexico tariff drama. We will have passed a spending bill, which we're almost on there. Ukraine and Russia might be at a ceasefire, maybe even a peace deal. Like come May, things could look a lot different, and then everyone's gonna start making noise about Cybercab and robotaxi. So it's kind of like one of those things. Get through the next 6 weeks, and things might look a lot different.
Yeah, I hope you're right. I absolutely do. I mean, none of us could have predicted what happened here in January to today, the stock falling this much, the hatred skyrocketing the way it has. But at the same time, it's like the weirdest year when it's like the oddest time that this is happening with two new vehicles coming in announced in a couple months. You got June coming in around the corner for FSD. We just released FSD in China. That should have been like a wake up call to everybody that it actually happened. It actually happened in China, right? Because we were also concerned about them using it as a pawn to negotiate with governments. You got India. You're now selling Tesla in India. Them launching a megapack factory in Texas. Now Elon announcing they're going to double production output in the U.S. in a couple of years. It's all coming together very nicely. So, this is noise. What we're hearing, some of it. Most of it.
I think a lot of it.
Yeah. And but I like the way you've always bring it back to, which is really true, that, and then the end of the economy, the interest rates, the tariff scenario, all that needs to be resolved for Tesla to be able to then shine, right? So that's bigger driver. A Mag 7 has all fallen significantly, right? Tesla more.
Yeah.
But Mag 7 have all fallen.
Tesla.
So there's that pause, right? It's happening right now.
Yeah, this isn't just a Tesla thing. And honestly, you're starting to see glimpse of things. We see that CPI came in cooler than expected. Core CPI came in the lowest it's been in 4 years. We see egg prices are starting to come down. Oil prices are starting to come down. We saw in the CPI numbers that
house price.
Living equivalents rates did not go up, and if anything, they're moderating. Owners equivalents rent is moderating. So everything seems to be moderating. The bond market is telling you that the Fed should be cutting. So there's a lot of things that show that's showing that we're making better progress on inflation. A lot of people will say that we need to see what happens with tariffs, but I think the way this will probably play out, I imagine, is that the whole reciprocal tariff, what'll probably happen, I'm sure there's a few countries that will not want to play ball, and they'll say, oh, you know what, okay, we're gonna put tariffs on top of your tariffs. But I think a lot of countries will say, okay, we'll back off on the tariffs we have on the United States, and the US will say, okay, great, then we won't put tariffs on you, and we want free trade. But this is the big knock on with let's pick on Canada for a second. When Canada tariffs us 200 something percent for milk in Canada, it's well, what's that about? Something I think it's 150% for cheese. These are the things. It's why? That doesn't make sense. Why do we have that? Where's the free trade? So,
yeah.
Negotiations are never sexy
Yeah, and I think their
if
posturing
it's
is mostly what I think too. I think as well, and so
yeah.
it'll just be resolved pretty easily. Like though somebody will back down and we'll be fine.
And
We'll see.
and I
But
will
that's what
say,
I'm thinking.
and this isn't really a political statement, but you started seeing a lot of the let's say more liberal media trying to kind of joke on Trump, saying he's all bluster or whatever. Like he's just gonna say he's doing all these tariffs or whatever. You saw that like all in January and February, and that honestly kind of worked uh, against the markets, because when you have a lot of these liberal media saying that, all of a sudden you force Trump's hand to be like, we'll do them tomorrow. If you guys think that we're just saying these things and it's just a negotiation tactic, we'll do it tomorrow. Like you're gonna tell me that I'm just threats and no action. Well, I can't get to true negotiation if you think that I'm just, blowing smoke. Like it's a negotiation is only as good as you think someone's actually going to do something. I am only threatening to you as long as you actually think that I will punch you in the face if things come to it. If you don't think that's going to happen, then you can walk all over me. And that's why the US military has a presence of power. That's our most important thing as a military, is our projection of power. That presence allows people to think, okay, we're not going to mess with the United States, because they got some muscle behind them. And so I think a lot of this noise came, or all of this market people awakening like, okay, Trump might not be just threatening. He may actually do it, but you have to win any negotiation. One,
Okay.
it's not going to be great for both parties. There's no one ever feels great if it's a fair negotiation. That's just the way it is. Everyone's got to take some off the table.
Yeah, so the tariff conversation needs to be resolved, and then we'll start to see things improve in the stock market. We'll see. Thank you very much, Nick. Stay on the show here, and you'll be redirected to Brian, and he'll answer any questions that was asked. Thanks, everybody. Bye-bye.